Okay. So this is a meeting of the committee to investigate the feasibility of hiring seasonal law enforcement officers. This was a request that was made by the Board of Commissioners at the June 16th Board of Commissioners meeting, and today we're going to have a meeting with the committee, which consists of the town manager, the chief of police, Commissioner Kwiatkowski, and Commissioner Sullivan. And we're going to discuss issues and items that need to be researched in order to determine whether or not it is feasible, both economically and personnel-wise, to hire seasonal police officers commencing with the 2021 season. So, with that, I'll open the floor.
Could I just have a brief segue? I understand, I think Chief's got a court date, or you've got another.
We're going to be at the courthouse by a little after 12 today,
So for him to leave 11:30?
11:45, or 12:15.
Just to put a...
Let's just do a hard stop, 11:30.
Okay, that'll allow him to get...
Fine. Thank you for that.
I see that some of the things that Mike put into the directive to the town manager had to do with feasibility. Things that needed to be covered were cost, utilization, mode of transportation, length of employment, training, certification, uniforms, any other items committee member identifies. And I definitely agree with all of those. The only other one I would add is exactly what our date range is.
Length of service.
Pardon?
Length of service.
I thought length of service was their training length of service.
No, how
Oh,
long will you utilize
okay.
that?
Thank you. Okay. I did.
Is that what you mean when you're talking about the 2021 season? When you say length of service?
No, what time period of the year we're going to cover? Is it Memorial Day to Labor Day? Is it May 15th to September 15th?
That's what I mean, 2021 season.
Yeah.
2021 season.
The summer
Summer season.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we have so many different definitions now of summer season.
Yeah.
What is it exactly we mean?
Okay.
Because that's very important, of course, when it comes to cost.
Yeah.
Okay. As I was thinking about this and just doing a little bit of quick digging, we all know that Ocean Isle uses part-time. We've all discussed that. But I also, just by going and Googling quickly came up with Emerald Isle, because they were looking for part-time police officers. They actually have positions advertised, including what the qualifications of the person has to be. And 2 islands in South Carolina quickly popped up: Sullivan's Island and Pawleys Island. That they also use them. So amongst these three is sort of a definition in one of them of qualifications and a starting rate, hourly rate. Some of them cover then what they actually use them for. So these kinds of things can kind of be a mesh of what do we want to, how do we envision this? And then what I was also thinking is, would on-phone discussions with different beach towns that use part-time officers be a very useful almost first step, where there's just a list of questions to ask them about the good, the bad, and the ugly involved in each of them, and who the best person would be to have those discussions. Because it could be it's police to police, or it could be commissioner to police, would be just as valuable. So those were sort of my background that I did a little digging.
I like where you're headed with that. I came with more questions than answers. So, and actually, this was the first time I've seen this piece, but I kind of had a lot of those exact same questions. I guess my first one is, what is the end goal? You know, is what are we shooting for as far as beach patrol? And I think you kind of covered that. And what is the definition? What are the expectations?
Well,
The duties and responsibilities.
you remember that when we did the commissioners did their objectives, and one of the things around the police department was that, you know, making sure that we are addressing, I would just say, the sore spots for that our residents raise all the time. And on the beach, it has to do mainly with dogs. But we all know that, again, alcohol is forbidden. I'm not, and if they want to hide it, they're going to hide it. Glass on the beach, which oftentimes is associated with alcohol, is an increasing problem. And I thought we had something about we don't want glass on the beach. But it's dogs on the beach. I don't know how much rowdyism there is, but I would assume there's some extent. But on the beach it was mainly dogs. But if you then come back and step back one further, the other things that our residents are, well, and everybody I think flags this year-round, but particularly during season, is the parking violations and inappropriate vehicle speeding and golf cart misuse. So I know we talk about part-time police and the need to have police on the beach, but I think we can actually look at it in terms of how we can use part-time police to help us address the three big things. And if part of it is because they come up onto the road at times, and it's not just on the beach, that's a possibility. Can the police be used in conjunction with rangers, or do they replace rangers? Can rangers actually be allowed to issue citations if they're civil citations? Because my reading of different parts of the code, the state code, do sort of suggest to me that if it's a civil violation, it doesn't have to be a police officer, but the people who are going to issue them do have to be sworn to, allowed to do it. And so sometimes I'm wondering, do we have to have police to issue a dog citation? I still think we need a police presence on the beach because it gives more of it's an attention getter. And so is it enough to have police patrolling the beach in conjunction with we still have rangers, or is it better to just stop the rangers? But part of that would have to do, to me, with rangers would be allowed to issue dog citations, not just the police, if we're really trying to nip it, early in the week. To me, it's if you catch them early in the week and you can stop them Sunday, Monday, that they know they're being watched, and you just tell them, because often they don't know, that could be a strong way during season to get the message out really quick. And then, again, there's still the parking. And again, I came down the road today, and at the 10 to 1100 block, last public walkway, there's a big golf cart just parked there, and we just don't have the patrol power. And when you get down further, a lot of times that's the accesses they're parking at with the golf carts. So it's how to use part-time to help the full-time police force get it all done.
Right.
Mike?
I think I would say that the last sentence is more what I believe people had in mind. It's not a concentration on just dogs on the beach or people doing it. My idea behind this is we have a certain number of police officers. It's been made clear that there's a belief that we need more police to adequately both protect the people and to enforce the rules. And so is it feasible to hire seasonal police officers to accomplish that goal? So it's both patrolling the island to make sure that people are safe and their property is safe, and taking care of enforcement of the regulations that are not being enforced to what we would consider, the appropriate level. So that's the idea. I mean, Chief, the idea is if we hire 1, 2, or 5 of these people, how will we utilize them to accomplish that goal? And will that benefit the police in general? And can we be more successful in finding the middle ground to being hospitable to our visitors, as well as having our visitors follow the rules while they're on the island?
The question I would have is, Mike, you mentioned to hire seasonal police officers, are we going to have a debate or discussion on whether or not it should be police officers? Because I heard Pat say, can we have civilians cite civil citations? So, I mean, we're open-minded toward the flavor of the Kool-Aid here. It's trying to ascertain not only what the right mix of the workforce should be, but the numbers, the numbers of them.
But my understanding
Okay.
is anything to do with a vehicle has to be done by the police. Was the reading I was doing, and again, I don't know all, but the reading I was doing, it was sort of like if it's a traffic violation, that's police.
Yes.
Yeah,
but-
so, the things that are on the beach that are things like dog glass on the beach would be a civil citation. People on the dunes, I don't know what that is, but anything with a motor vehicle has to be the police.
That, I would have to read it, I'm not
Yeah.
sure, but I would.
Definitely speeding is the police.
Speeding, yes, I would agree anything on the highway, but parking,
I'm not,
just for me thinking about it, parking is gonna be a civil, because we write those on a civil town citation anyway. So they may, if it's enforceable under that, maybe.
Plus, a majority of the towns that have paid parking, it's not police officers that enforce that, right?
Right.
It's employees that do that, so
Yes.
I doubt that you need police officers to enforce parking regulations.
Yeah, I would have to read it too, but that's just where my first thought is.
Yeah. But to get back to what David said, I think the idea is to find out the best mix to accomplish the goal, right? So if that's more beach rangers or more police officers and no beach rangers, then that's what we'll do. But whatever it takes, we'll hopefully look at the various options and determine which works, which we think will work best for the town.
The idea is to splash as much research
Yeah.
contained.
Find out what
Gotcha.
I think we'll.
Pat, you
Yeah.
mentioned several things here, the hot items, parking vehicles, speeding, but you also followed up with people in the dunes. That's a recurring kind of thing too. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that we capture
right.
that. And two, we can get into this at the next time that we get together. And I'm sure that everybody's going to go away and come back with, oh, I thought of this. Would it be helpful to, go through the traditional brainstorming, sticking stuff on the wall kind of thing after, going back? We think of this, we think of that, just so to capture it for posterity.
I think we found that works well for us.
It works well for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I like doing that myself.
Yeah, and if it's just if it ends up being that's kind of off the wall and it comes off the wall, big deal. Yeah.
Well, I can take care of that.
Mhm.
To arrange it for the next time.
Mhm.
We can do that kind of thing.
blocking sidewalks was another, of course, because that's my bugaboo. blocking sidewalks.
I think I would just call those quality of life issues, right? It encompasses all of that.
Mhm.
What's on the beach, parking on the sidewalks, parking in the street, so
Yeah.
it's all minor irritants.
And they add up.
Yes. Oh,
They
absolutely,
definitely,
absolutely.
particularly this time of year.
Absolutely.
One good thing is I have noticed more golf carts observing courtesy, that when they see there's a long line behind them, they actually pull over and wait for the traffic to go. So I'm thinking, well, that's good. That's good.
It is. We have tried to make a lot more effort this year to spend time talking to golf carts and explaining to them the rules and regulations.
Mhm. And then, of course, during high season, the other big day, which I don't think part-time helps that much unless they are police officer, is good old 4th of July and fireworks. It's coming up, and I know there's nothing we can do about it other than call in if somebody's doing something really stupid. But as I said, really stupid has been 2 years of people firing them over my house to get them out in the marsh. I just don't like that.
I hate that everybody's canceled shows this year.
Yeah,
It
so
scares me
for private,
for this weekend, yeah.
yeah, me too.
We'll be out in full force, so.
If I could just, on an administrative note,
Yes.
I know that the deliverable is like the December meeting there.
Because
December 20,
yeah.
the December 20 Board of Commissioners meeting. To get to that, how would y'all like to carry business forward? Like to have a meeting every month, from this day time kind of thing, what is today, Thursday?
Mhm.
Or what would y'all like to see? Because I'd just like to get in a schedule. If we could do it on a regular basis, it'd probably be better for the chief and
I think
and
that
Heather too.
I think that a meeting next month, if the idea is accepted, that phoning a few of the beach towns that do this with some standard questions and asking them, their experience, what the main difficulties are, having it discussed in a month would be very valuable, because it'll give a flavor of, are there certain things that don't expect that this works well, and others that it works very well for this. And then probably if we schedule one a month and then we just decide we don't have to have one, say, in September, it's easier to cancel something than to try to build it in.
Fine.
Yeah.
So just look at
What's this, the first?
first Thursday.
First Thursday.
of the month.
I know that works. I know that works for me. I know I don't have anything going on right now.
Well, that sounds
Simply.
good. Tentatively, I'll
Yeah.
pencil it in, do a calendar check and get back to you. And then, administratively, Pat, you're talking about doing a telephone interview and what's the questions. How would y'all propose that be done? What are the questions? Evidently, you got some questions in mind, and who's going to be called?
Well, that's what I said. Is it better for police chief to talk to police chief, or?
I think if we have a call, if it's okay with the person, and I guess, first I would ask, have you been in contact with any chief that actually employs seasonal police officers?
I've had small conversations with Ocean Isle Beach. We've not gotten into detailed or anything structured.
So I would suggest that you see if the chief at Ocean Isle Beach would be amenable to sitting at a telephone conference where as many of us as possible could sit there and ask questions that they think, because he may give an answer that Pat or I or David may have a question to that you may not. So if he's amenable to sitting in his office at a conference, then we could speak to him and pick his brain for his knowledge.
just remember that when we assemble as a committee, it's
It
a
has to be-
public body.
It's a public,
And that
yeah.
telephone call would be, so I mean,
They have to.
hypothetically,
Mhm.
it would be this format, and he's on the telephone.
And you have to know that.
And he-
Correct. Well, the other island town that I found Googling from North Carolina was, of course, Emerald Isle. So that's just, so Ocean Isle, Emerald Isle were two that in North Carolina I know happen. If we wanted to just stick to North Carolina, because again, if we're going to have a phone conference and they're happy to do it, they know the North Carolina public meeting rules.
And I think if we're going to be open to the idea of doing it not just the police department, keeping the beach rangers or extending it, if we're still throwing that idea out there, we probably need to talk with some of the other towns that aren't using police and see what does or doesn't work for them too, instead of just talking to the departments that are using police. I mean, just my 2 cents worth.
You mean towns that just use that have beach rangers but no seasonal police officers?
Yeah, I mean, just see if it's, what they're doing, what's working for them and what's not.
Okay.
I mean, if we're looking at departments that are only using police, we should also look at the other way around since we're not at this.
I wonder if anybody does blended.
And I have no idea. I haven't done the research, so I don't know who's using what. I have heard that Sunset, I think, uses their fire department, which
To patrol the beach?
to patrol the beach. And again, that's what I've heard. I have not talked to them. It's a little different with us because Tri-Beach is not our fire department, whereas Sunset's
Has their
is.
own.
So I mean, don't even know that any of that will be a possibility. I'm just saying there are different things happening out there, and I think we need to be aware of all of them before we make.
Are we aware of the communities that have beach rangers but don't have seasonal police? Have we identified those?
I have
yet?
not, and that would just take some.
Perhaps that's a data point.
Yeah, I think that would take some
We have to-
simple
We
phone calls.
benchmark.
Yeah, I mean, I remember before we started our beach rangers, there was a discussion of having volunteers, citizen volunteers, because I think Oak Island was doing that. But I thought what I recalled was after a couple years, Oak Island was finding getting volunteers more difficult. So I don't know if they opted. I have to admit that out of the Brunswick beaches, I keep the least track of what is happening in Oak Island. And part of that might be because I get a lot of information from the Beacon,
Right.
and they're not in the Beacon, they're in the Pilot. Yeah, and I just don't read the Pilot as diligently.
You're right. I mean, before the beach rangers started, they had the organizer and supervisor come here from the town, and that was what happened. It had grown. They had I don't know. I'll make the number up because it was 3 or 4 years ago, but they had like 45 people that volunteered. So they had a whole. They hired somebody to coordinate that, but the rest of the people were volunteers. And he had a data sheet in the computer, and he was able to assign people and do this and do that, and it just kept shrinking, and so they couldn't do it anymore because people didn't want to do it. So,
Well, with an average age of over 63 years old for our citizens, I'm not sure I want in the heat of summer. I mean, I think I said that originally was, this is kind of a difficult, hot weather thing, and as you get older, you're not necessarily going to want to be doing that.
That's right.
So, okay. So,
And on another administrative note, how would y'all see this? Who's going to get to write it? It's like compile this and turn it into a document.
that can get assigned. Who's going to write it? Who's going to write this up?
Okay.
we can decide on that
We'll decide that at
when
a
we
later
get
date.
closer to the finish line.
Okay.
I mean, I see David.
Yeah, it's important to have.
I see
to
you're
see
taking.
how big the pile
yeah,
is.
because I see you're taking minutes. So.
Well,
yeah.
that's the minute taker. I'm just trying to.
I know,
taking
but
notes.
you're taking notes on what you think are key. So,
It's the way I learned.
okay. So I think today's meeting, we need to come out of it. We've come out of it, or we're coming out with. We're going to meet monthly there are some things that we need to agree that we're going to go forward with, and then who's going to go forward. And if it's contacting to have public discussions with a couple islands that have, then that's fine. But if it's also finding and talking to towns that have a different method, which would be like the beach ranger concept, somebody's got to find some other than our experience. So my question would be, who's going to do that?
I'll jump on that. I don't mind. I'll call around and just ask what they're using and you know,
'Cause it was-
just get some generalized ideas so that in the next meeting I can say, hey, this island is doing this,
Mhm.
and then we can dig into how do they do it and go from there with that.
Is it?
And I can poll the manager's listserv just to see, because we have a coastal
Yeah.
caucus, and just to see how it's done other places,
Right.
just to get a broad brush of how that is.
That may be a quicker, broader brush than what I'm going to.
Well, I don't know about this time of year getting feedback from the managers, but we'll see.
The question of civil citations. How many of the beach towns have non-police officers issuing citations? They have to be civil citations.
Every town, I think every town that has paid parking.
Yeah, but
Because
what besides paid parking? What else? Like I said, the dogs on the beach. It's like after you give somebody a first warning, if they keep doing it, you're going to issue them a citation. That's my whole point. Is I don't mind warning somebody once, because I think a lot of people do come here not really being aware, and they don't read the sign as they walk. Plus, if you have a dog in a front row house, you don't look at what the walkway says.
Right.
But, after that first time, it's like they keep doing it, then that's just in defiance. There's ignorance, and then there's defiance.
again, that's the balancing act
Mhm.
between being welcoming and having people follow the rules. So
Correct.
I think that's a bit of a different issue. How much enforcement? I guess at the end of the day, it affects whether you actually want to hire somebody, because if you're not going to enforce the rule, what that?
Right.
You want them to be more than scarecrows, right? So if
Yeah.
you're not going to enforce it, but if you're going to enforce it, so.
And as you said, if people who have paid parking have non-police who just, parking enforcement officers who go. Parking enforcement officers in right-of-way and things, is that again something that people are fine turning over to non-police, or do you want police discretion on that? These are some of the questions. What's the appropriate level? It's one thing in a parking lot. It's another thing if you're.
Well,
Yeah.
I got it, but I was just saying that the initial question was,
Mhm.
who can do it?
Right.
If is it permissible to have civilians issue the parking ticket? And without looking at the law, I would assume it is permissible, because all of the other places do. And it's not always private property, it's public property as well, right? The town, so it's the street and the sidewalk and so forth and so on. So I would think that that's permissible. But if we could, I would, and it just puts the weight on you, but and the town manager. I think the whole idea about whether this is actually doable comes down to answering the questions that I kind of outlined. First of all, when we talk about it, are we going to hire people for the 100 days of summer, or are we going to expand that to the next seasons so that people are going to be hired for 160 days or 180 days, because that affects the cost. So we have to kind of look at that and at least talk about it. Maybe you can come up with an idea about whether it's necessary to have extra people leading up to the 100 days, or whether the 100 days is suffice, right? And that's clearly something I think the town and the chief should look at. Yet the other thing is the cost, because there's more than the salary, right? I know that, Chief, you mentioned that you wanted to have some training in addition to the training that they would get at BLET. So what would that, that I know from speaking to you that police officers don't purchase their own weapons. So if we hire a police officer, we'll have to purchase weapons to have him supplied. I'm assuming that all the police officers I see here have tasers, so we have to purchase more tasers. And then, let's see, the equipment and the training, and then how will we utilize that? If we are we going to? I know we don't have excess automobiles or vehicles on the island for the police. So if we hire these people, how will they get around? Especially if we have, okay, it's simple. Hypothetically speaking, they're on the beach, they use the gators that the rangers use, that type of vehicle. But if they're going to supplement patrol, how are we going to do that?
Right.
Do we have a car for that? If we don't have a car, will we give them a golf cart and keep them to a certain area of the island that they can respond to? Maybe a motor scooter as opposed to a vehicle, because you can get a scooter for $5,000 as opposed to $60,000. So these are all questions that I think we'll have to know in order to make a decision. We'll have to have some idea before we can make a decision on the feasibility in general. And I think we have to start working on those issues now. And so that's up to you, because...
And if there are certain definitions of what they do and what they don't do, does that change the equipment they have to have? For example, do you need a gun on the beach if the point is dogs and glass on the beach? And if you're focusing on parking and not moving vehicle violations, again, is a gun...
If they're going to be police officers,
if
they
they're
need a
gonna-
weapon. If they're just going to enforce the quality of life issues, then they're not police officers, they don't need a weapon.
And this is what I come back to, is a weapon can be defined as different things. And do you need a gun versus a taser if you are mainly doing parking and...
If you're a police officer, you need a gun.
Okay. Okay. I just thought, I always
The
put...
bad guy doesn't know you're just giving out tickets. You're in a uniform, you're putting yourself out as a police officer, you have to be able to protect yourself.
Chief can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's actually a criminal justice standards and training requirement, that if you're a
Yeah,
sworn officer.
you have a gun?
Yeah, and I was going to get into, if we're going to base the equipment off of the job description, then if their job description is law enforcement, the gun's going to be covered under that anyway. If it's only going to be the civil side, and we decide not to do sworn law enforcement, then we can base that equipment off of that. But if it is going to be a sworn law enforcement position with powers of arrest and all that long book that comes with it, then yeah, unfortunately, all the equipment is going to have to come with it too. So.
Okay.
And the insurance.
Yeah. I mean, the whole game, but yeah. But we can get into that once we.
I know I missed the last few minutes of that, but I would suggest that perhaps as a baseline is to bring back what our current costs are of what we got now. What the costs are of how we do business now.
You mean our ranger costs? Yeah. Yeah.
That just lets you know what you got, what kind of skin you have in the game right now.
It's roughly $60,000, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Give or take, between
Depends on what
the
you count.
salary and the equipment that they have, give or take. So those were, and again, we spoke about transportation. If we hire them, how will they get around? And of course, that depends on what their job entails. But if we want to supplement the police patrol on this, within the town, then they're going to need to get around. And I don't think bicycles are
No,
feasible.
no.
I mean, some places use bicycles, but this is an 8-mile stretch. It doesn't make sense.
Well, you can do it once in a day.
But you can't.
Maybe twice, but, then you get tired. And I don't do it in the heat of the day. Yeah.
That's
No, I
what
know.
we have to consider, because, again, when it gets to the feasibility, the idea here is to adequately protect and do what we want to do. And by not hiring a permanent employee because of the associated costs, right? But if the costs are close because of all the added requirements in addition to the salary, then it may not be feasible. So I think we want to look at everything and get a good idea of what it's going to cost. Just for now, if we hire, as the town manager, if we hire a seasonal person to work 3 months, 4 months, we don't have to offer them let me answer it this way, a leading question. Do we have to give them the same fringe benefits? Do they get health care? Do they get pension? So none of those.
They're actually classified as part-time temporary employees.
So that reduces the cost by about a third, roughly, of a full-time employee.
So if we get to I think a question we should answer today is, do we want to do this only the Memorial Day, Labor Day, or do we want to do it the 15 May to 15 September?
Let me verify exactly how we've done it. I want to say, don't hold me to this, that we've actually brought them in a couple of weeks before Memorial Day to train.
I think we do.
And then we carry them a week after Labor Day. But let me get certain on that. But that's what's I may be mixing up the services here, because I know that we do something different for trash.
Yes, but I'm
that involves Easter.
I'm also remembering that we bring them in mid-May, because the first couple weeks,
We wanted to train.
and we don't want them to start, when you've got your first habit. You want them to kind of get into a habit of what they do before they get the Memorial Day hit.
And some of that is seasoned or flavored by the availability of the workforce that we've used. College gets out like the first week in May, but generally speaking, I think that the window has been Memorial Day to Labor Day with a couple of weeks on either side.
Yeah. I think another thing is that...
But I can verify that when I baseline the cost of the current.
Yeah. And I think another thing which the chief can think on better than we can, but, are we talking about the kind of things that are most needed, you need somebody every day? Or are there certain days during the week that, like definitely Saturdays and Sundays, are just peak days for a variety of things? Probably Monday, as people are adjusting. Is middle of the week calmer? Is it so these are other considerations when we talk about part-time. It's like, is part-time that we have to cover 7 days a week, or is it I have certain days that I know that I always am overwhelmed? And obviously holidays are stand out as well, but it's a scheduling thing. It's sort of a, it helps contribute to the whole targeting when we need them for what we need.
And I can't answer that part yet. I can answer it for what we do outside, but if we're talking about the beach ranger, beach park, because the beach rangers are there, they'll have a much better idea of what the week looks like. I know what Saturdays look like. I mean, you know what Saturdays look like. There's nowhere to park, and they're shoulder to shoulder on the beach strand. So your weekends, obviously, but as far as a Wednesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I don't know what it looks like out there, so I can't answer that for you. But I do agree that that is something that we could look at with the part-time is, do you need it 7 days a week, or do you need it, 5 days a week, or what do you know?
And talking to other towns could be equally
right.
helpful, that, hey, we've kind of, worked this way.
That's right.
And we do have information on what the shift profiles that we currently use are. We'll bring that back.
I would think, though, that if you're looking to hire temporary part-time employees, that you would have a difficult time hiring a police officer to work 2 days a week.
Right.
If you can't guarantee somebody 5 days a week as a temporary police officer, why would they come here?
And that's going to be the other thing we're going to have to look at is how do you get them here and how do you retain them here?
Yeah.
Well,
so
I'm certainly not thinking it's only 2 days a week. I'm just thinking, is it 4 out of 7, 5 out of 7 is enough? We don't need them 7 out of 7.
I got you.
Yeah.
What I'm saying
And if they're temporary part-time, the question is what do you need to do to keep them for the season?
right.
Because
Well, and then
it's,
if you want to, and again, this is discussion for later, is how far do you want to expand it? Is if their duties during the season are the beach, do you want to extend it during the off season to, hey, we'll keep you here, we don't have much work for you, but in the event of a hurricane, make a quick phone call and you've got extra personnel
on reserve.
on reserve. And I'm not saying that that's true, I'm just saying those
Sure.
are other things to look at. Is that something you want to do, or do you want to just tell them, hey, come September 15th or whatever the magic day we decide is, wish you the best of luck and we'll call you next year. But then when you call them next year, are you going to get them back, or are you going to be starting from scratch again? So,
well, I've always liked the idea of having reserve
Right.
for, like you say, hurricane in particular. We have a
Right.
problem, and having a list of people that you can call that have said, I would be interested in,
Right.
and that reserve status just can keep going until they say we don't want to be reserve anymore.
That's right. I mean, it's something to look at. If we go through the hiring process and the equipment process and everything else with the beach, then how much do you extend it? But those are other things that we can look at. But I think they're all things that need to be considered as we go through it.
So what I have is duration. David's going to look at the ranger dates. How other towns are doing things. David's going to send a call out to the coastal town managers and see what he can get. So it's like David's doing. And Jeremy's going to...
Jeremy's going to try to speak to a couple of the chiefs that actually use the seasonal and see if we can have a...
Oh, well, I'll see if any of them are interested in taking...
We're picking their brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're going to do an assessment on what the full cost would be. What the cost of the weapons, the tasers, the equipment, the training, et cetera. So
I can get a full cost of gear for, per
we
officer.
have that, right? And maybe some idea about what kind of transportation we have available and can utilize, and what transportation we would need if we hired X number of employees. I think that's a good start. And I guess I would also like, between both the town manager and the chief, again, the idea of trying to balance the enforcement and the hospitality and welcoming and so forth, just how much of the enforcement do we crave? How many people do we want want on the beach, and how much enforcement do we want, and how many summonses do, you know, I guess we're not looking for these summonses, we're looking for people to comply with
Yeah.
the quality of life issues that annoy other people, you know? I mean, I don't know how many people complain about they're walking down the beach and somebody's beautiful lad comes up and, you know, because they're throwing a ball on it. Now, to the guy with the lad, that's just he's exercising the pooch and having fun on the beach. To the person walking with their 3-year-old kid, it's not a happy time, and then they get into a confrontation. So we want to be able to balance all of that kind of stuff, right? So it's just like keep your dog off the beach until 5 o'clock, and everything is good. Keep your car off of the
Keep them on the
right-of-way.
leash.
Yeah.
Keep them on.
After 5 o'clock, yeah, all of that. So I guess the issue is how much, and I think you'd probably have to speak to Tim about that, about how
Right.
his, you know, how the current beach rangers feel about their ability to, you know, get people to take their dog off the beach, fill the hole up, do the, you know, the minor aggravating things that everybody sees happen on the beach. You know? And so that would have an effect on what we expect, who we need to do it, and how many people we would need to do it. And the other thing is, for you, we had the whole discussion about being able to protect the police officers, right? So the police officer isn't the only one responding to the argument with 10 people in the house at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? So how can we utilize, to me, this was the whole point of this was to try to get enough police on duty to take care of the number of assignments, the number of jobs that are called, but more so, under the circumstances we have here, to make sure that the police officer is protected, so he's not out there by his lonesome, right? So that's, you know, that's the thing that you have to try to help us with.
Okay.
How many officers? Because to me, this wasn't an idea of the quality of life. It was that's part of it. But the bigger part was protecting
Safety.
the property and the person of the people on the island, which is having a police officer there to respond to a call for service and not having to do that when it's dangerous by himself.
That's going to be my one question, if it's having non-officers doing civil citations, which I know others do, so it's possible, but the finding of people who are, let's just say, equally adept as a police officer issuing a citation, even if they're getting Hasselback,
Right.
because it can happen.
Oh, yeah.
So it would be a different type. It could be a different type of person than someone we have as a typical ranger if they actually are tasked with giving a citation. It needs another level of here's a part of your job and here's how you have to do it and are you willing to do it. But that's for another.
So now that you mentioned that, that's another job to
Yeah.
figure out. If we, as a town, we say, okay, now the ranger job is expanded to not only being the ambassador on the beach, but being the enforcement agent on the beach, how much is it going to cost us to train those people? Because that's a cost we don't have now.
Right.
So we want to be able to factor that in when we're weighing the cost between hiring law enforcement and hiring civilians.
Yeah, and we'll need to check what all's involved in basically code enforcement, someone being designated as a code enforcement officer.
There are rules, yeah.
Yeah, there's,
Yeah.
I don't know them off the top of my head.
No, wouldn't expect it.
But
I
that's
guess
we'll
the idea
look
is-
into that. Because like Rhonda is a code enforcement
Yeah.
officer, Tim is a code enforcement officer. And so those are examples, they're not exact, but they're examples. But there's a protocol, I think, that we have there.
Sure.
It may be simple, it may be complex, I just don't know, but we can find that out.
It's never simple, because you have to figure out how long the training is, where they have to go for it, whether they have a training that'll fit in to next season, all of those variables that we have no idea about right now.
Do the type of people we currently have as rangers, do they want to do that?
Sure.
It's a different job description.
Right.
It's a different job
Is it something
description.
they're even interested in?
Yeah.
Much different. I don't think I have anything else.
Okay, I guess I have, from this talk, I have a list of like 9 topics, and they do all fall to the town manager and the police chief at this point.
Good planning.
No, it's not. Well, no, I mean, but again, range dates, David call out to other town managers, Jeremy speaking to a couple chiefs to see if they're willing to do a phone conference, Jeremy assessing costs of equipment, transportation, Jeremy and the town manager to work through how much enforcement do we want on the quality of life issues, and then defining what's required so that non-police officers, citizens, issue citations, civil citations.
Also determining what the current start and
Yeah,
end
the
time.
duration. He's going to look at the ranger dates to sort of suss that one out. But yeah, I mean, if we had people on reserve, it's true. You could also say, are you available to help out for the festivals? If when we start having festivals again.
You got festival, you've got 5K races, you see those over here all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Give the staff a break instead of them
Sure.
having to come in
an
and.
officer calls out sick, 2 hours before shift starts, and
Mhm.
so I mean, those are definitely things to weigh in. I don't know whether they're exactly good or bad. I'm sorry, give me just 1 second.
I actually saw, because I sent you to the Pawleys Island, I saw the example. They actually had as many part-time, I think it was that island, had as many part-time in the summer as they had full staff. So some of them obviously are really just the limited number. They really look at summer as a true bulk up for things and then go back to a more streamlined staff. But none of the islands are 8 miles long.
Yeah,
Art's-
and one of the things I think that we need to be real particular about teasing out in terms of data points is that, let's just say that you got 20 part-timers. Well, are those 20 part-timers working 8-hour shifts, or are they 20 part-timers that work 2 hours 3 times a week? So that's one of the shift profiles, that exercises that we'll have to go through.
Yeah,
Because if it's 20 people, covering the 100 days of summer, and the budget's $30,000 for manpower, well, they're not working 8-hour shifts, that kind of thing. So we can tease that out as part of our dialogue, I think.
Mhm. So is this about right for the first meeting? You-
I think that it's free range and it's going to be whatever we want to bring up as a collaboration.
Well, we know we have a December timeline, so and if the next meeting is putting up the stickies for everything you think of, that's the first step, but these kinds of things, then the next meeting, it's a report back, and then what do we do next? Yeah?
Well, I mean, I'm thinking that after we get
Mhm.
the information that we're looking to get, then we can start to work on whether that in itself is feasible. I mean, if we,
Or if it's enough, if it's
Yeah.
enough information.
yeah,
You know.
Mhm.
but, based on the input, then we can start to decide, for instance, what the length of service will be, right? Will it be the 100 days, or will it be more than 100 days? Is it feasible to have people on patrol as opposed to merely on the beach? And I'm certainly hoping that we have people on patrol,
Patrol.
because that's really my main focus here, is to have people on patrol. And my aspiration, hope, whatever you want to call it. And so we can start to look at those things. We'll be able to know about the training, right? And when is the next school, and how will we be, we'll be able to look at the pool of graduates from the BLE to T school and get them on board in time. So we'll have a lot more information to work on, that we can actually start to make some headway into where we're going to go with the project. The cost, right? We'll have a better idea of what the cost per person would be, and then we'll be able to figure out how that might fit into the budget, considering where we're going and what we're doing, how much we're willing to appropriate for this particular issue. So I think this is a good start. Trying to lay the foundation to get the information we need to make the decisions that we have to make in the next 6 months.
Then if we've accomplished what we need to accomplish in the first meeting, we can stop the meeting.
Amen to that.
It's fine with me. I think that we've definitely got some
Yeah.
takeaways, to
Mhm.
and to bring back. It's a great starting point. So I'm good with where we are.
And the only reason I would say we plan to do what tasks next time is so that you can prepare your thinking, and if the public has anything they want to add,
Sure.
they know that the next meeting is when we're going to do anything you can think of that this program might be meant to cover, get it up there.
But I think we did part of that
Yeah.
today. We just didn't put stuff on the wall.
Right,
You know,
but as David says, with more
We can-
thinking,
we
you
can-
might come up with a few
Sure.
more things that
Sure, we could
you want
put
to
those
add.
up there and have
And then
that
you
one.
can, some of them may be, this isn't the kind of program that's going to do that, and others can be, yeah, I didn't think of that, this would be good. Okay. Then I would just suggest we can stop the meeting.
I would move to adjourn.
I would move to adjourn.